Let's talk about argument. It's going to be a theme here. You're in college now, which means we're not going to just talk about stuff, and we're not just going to write about stuff to summarize or describe. We're going to argue. But what does that mean? When most people think about arguing, they tend to think about people just yelling at each other and not listening. Well, that's not really what I'm trying to get across here. If we're going to go for a dictionary definition, I'm not a big fan of them, but if we're going to go for a dictionary definition of an argument, it would be a reason or a set of reasons given in support of an idea, action, or theory. And I could go on and on about this, and trust me, many people have heard me go on and on about this. But I think it would be better if we hear from another source. So, luckily, I found a 1951 training film about this. It's better than you'd expect. Watch with me, will you?
This is the story of an arguer. Jeff loved to argue about anything and everything.
After all, the Vikings were here before Columbus, and so were the Indians. And we don't know how many others. So how can you say Columbus discovered America? And you say Jonesville won the tournament last year? Oh, they couldn't have.
Oh, liverwurst. You must be crazy to eat that stuff.
That's the silliest opinion I've ever heard. There are 10 cars that'll hold the road better. We don't need to enter a new conference. That's just the coach's idea. He wants a better job next year, that's
If you
all.
like to argue so much, Jeff Field, why don't you go out for debate and learn something about it? Look.
Oh, all this stupid. Now, what's a puppet theater have to do with debating?
Okay, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Alice. We've an interesting gadget here. You'll see why in a moment. Now, we're here today to find out how to argue. Is that so difficult? Well, it isn't easy to become skilled in argumentation. Okay, Alice. Now, first of all, what subjects are worth arguing about? Now, let's see how many of us can recognize suitable subjects for arguments. Alice?
Oh, Judy, where are you? Judy, my love. Oh, I'm tying my shoes, silly. Well, now you're here. Listen, I went out to the farm yesterday. You did, and what for? Oh, look at the animals, and I saw a purple cow, and Purple cow? Yes, and I went up to her, and I said, how did you talk to her? Why, with my mouth, silly. Answer my question. I know you talk with your mouth, but that's not what I mean. Well, then say what you mean. Well, how could you talk to a cow? Now, who said anything about talking to a cow? Why don't you listen? You interrupt all the time. Now, looky here. You take that, and that, and that.
Well, was that a good subject for argument? What was the argument about? Yes?
I guess it was whether Punch talked to a cow. But Judy wasn't there. How would she know?
If there's no evidence available on your subject, why argue? What would be a better subject for them to argue?
Well, Judy might try to convince Punch that there is no such thing as a purple cow.
Or that he might be more observant. She might write.
What is a good subject for argument? Jeff thought about that one. He remembered some arguments he'd had.
You say Jonesville won the tournament last year?
Pointless to argue about a fact. That's easily checked, isn't it?
Oh, liverwurst. You must be crazy to eat that stuff.
pointless, too, to argue about matters of personal taste. They're seldom changed by argument.
That's the silliest opinion I've ever heard. Why, there are 10 cars that'll hold the road better.
Arguments about opinions can be purposeful, for argument often does change opinions.
We don't need to enter a new conference.
And arguments about proposed actions can be purposeful if they make their points. Yes, Jeff thought about these things.
Well, all right. If it's a subject on which we can influence what others believe, argument has purpose. If not, why argue? Agree? Fine. Now, let's go on to another question. Assuming that we have a good subject for argument, how should we argue?
Oh, well, where do you think you're going? Well, I'm going to Garden City next year with the team. We're going to join the new athletic conference, you know. Huh. Just because everybody wants to take a trip, we have to join a new athletic conference. Well, this is our big chance. We'll put our school on the map. Garden City, Garden City, go to Garden City. Do you think we're blind? Everybody knows you're just trying to take a nice long trip at school expense and get beat. Well, anyway, you'll agree we should try to put our school on the map if we can. Sure, if we can.
We've done okay until now. There's
Well,
nothing-
let's not have the same kind of argument that they had. This is a hot issue. We chose it because it is a real issue here in our school right now. It's a good subject for argument, agreed? The question is, how can we make that argument profitable? How can we argue so as to change opinions? Now, let's repeat this Punch and Judy argument. Whenever you see anything that keeps it from being profitable, we'll stop the show. All right, Alice.
Oh, well, where do you think you're going? Oh, I'm going to Garden City next year with the team. We're going to join the new conference, you know.
Wait a
Oh,
minute.
there's something wrong
We
there.
haven't decided whether to join the new conference or not. Punch doesn't seem to know what he's talking about.
And you feel you have to know what you're talking about to argue profitably.
I'll say.
All right. 1, be informed. Know your subject. That's the first essential of how to argue profitably. All right, Alice.
Just because everybody wants to take a trip, we have to join the new athletic conference. Well, this is our big chance. We'll put our school on the map. Garden City, Garden City, go to Garden City. What do you think we're doing, Leo?
Punch and Judy aren't listening to each other. How can Punch convince Judy if he doesn't know what Judy thinks, and vice versa?
Good point. That's step 2. Listen and understand. You can't argue profitably until you know what your opponent believes. All right, Alice?
Well, anyway, you'll agree we should try to put our school on a map if we can. Oh, sure, if we can. Well,
Hold
why
it.
can't
Isn't there something there? I mean, well, sometimes when you're arguing, you waste time over points you really agree on. At least Punch was trying there.
Good point. I wondered whether anyone would catch that. Find common ground. Two people in an argument usually agree on something. They have to, or else the argument won't convince anyone of anything.
And if you know where you agree, you can see more clearly where you disagree. Isn't that important in arguments?
Find the issues. Once you know exactly where you disagree, then you know exactly where to apply your information and reasoning. So, find the issues and work on them.
work on them? Oh, I'll work on you. I'll work on you. Oh.
After that, Jeff thought about subjects for argument, about methods of argument. He watched himself, too.
Well, that's silly. The rehearsal couldn't be at 7 o'clock. Miss Alquist can't.
Marquette can't get there by 7. She likes to eat at Hanson's restaurant.
Punch and Judy Irving.
What'd you say?
Oh, never mind. If Miss Altwa said 7 o'clock, I suppose we better be there then.
He tried to save his arguing for topics worth argument, opinions, proposed actions where his argument might make a difference. He tried to be informed, getting knowledge that would be useful to make his arguments profitable. He tried to listen, to understand his opponents and their positions. He tried to find common ground from which better understanding could be reached. And he tried to find the issues and attack them directly in his arguments. It took time to learn to argue effectively. But one day, not long ago,
Listen, gang, ticket sales are going swell, so I guess we'll have to reserve the gym for our party.
Wait a minute, why the gym? We want to use the lodge at Langdon Park.
That's rather expensive, isn't it?
No, it isn't. Besides, think of all the... Do you know how much they charge for the lodge?
Well, no.
Well, we want our party to be informal, don't we?
That's right.
We could have a good informal time at the lodge. We could decorate there. And they have a big fireplace where we could roast weenies and marshmallows.
That's a wonderful idea.
So don't you think we should first find out the cost of the lodge and then decide?
yes, Jeff is still an arguer, but he is learning to make his arguments purposeful and profitable. How well do you argue?
Am I the only one who really loved the fact that the educational advisor on that was named, I got it written down here because I didn't believe it at first, Utterback argument? Ha ha! Anyway. I want to have a word about the opinions. They said in the video that opinions are something worth arguing about. Now, the thing is, we have all seen a lot of really stupid opinions. And you've seen lots of people who treat opinions, particularly their own opinions, as if they're holy and beyond reproach. And that kind of rubs me the wrong way a whole lot. Because opinions aren't above reproach. You can have your opinions, but if you're entering a public discourse and if you're trying at all to try to find truth, to try to get to some better meaning, which if you're not, why are you here? If you're trying to find truth, then opinions can be valuable as long as you pursue them in a good way. Difference of opinion can be good because it leads people to think, and thinking is really important to opinions. There's a good reason why some of the most argumentative stuff you'll find in the traditional media will be labeled opinion, because opinion can be really good if it's backed up with logic, if it's backed up with evidence. And these are things we're going to be talking a lot more about as the course goes on. Now, because we're doing academic stuff, we're going to want to state our arguments as clearly and specifically as possible. And that's where the thesis statement comes in. If we haven't talked about this yet, we will. Particularly, we want to lay out this thesis statement very specifically with a specific subject of analysis, your precise claim, the thing you're going to be arguing, and the blueprint of reasons, the major points you're going to be bringing up in support of this. And then you'll organize your paper around that. Argument is going to be a recurring subject in here. Argument is inherently tied to thinking. So we're going to keep coming back to how we think, how we approach topics. We're always going to be doing it in service of coming up with the best possible interpretation. And you're going to hear me talk a lot more about that before we're done with each other. And we'll do that in the next video. See ya.